Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We're all truly lucky for the opportunity to hear from our opening keynote speaker, Dr. Neema Moraveji, this morning. I've known Neema for 13 years, dating back to when we attended the HCI Master's Program together at Carnegie Mellon. Neema came to CMU by way of the University of Maryland at College Park, where he received a bachelor's degree in computer science. At CMU, he worked with a research group focused on automated interpretation and search and retrieval in audio and video files. Very cool stuff for 13 years ago. If you find either of us at the opening reception later on, we might be cajoled into sharing some of the stories from CMU that make us less proud, but perhaps more notorious. So joking aside, I can recall attending a seminar series talk that Neema gave detailing his extensive backpacking travels through the Middle East and South Asia. I found him to be a very dynamic, intriguing speaker, and I knew he'd be a great fit for UXPA. After grad school, Neema revisited his love for travel, doing ethnography and fieldwork for Microsoft Research Asia. He was then accepted to the PhD program at Stanford University and has spent the last 8 years, first as a PhD candidate and now as a lecturer, spearheading the Calming Technology Lab. For as busy and hectic as Neema's life has been in the years I've known him, it seems appropriate that he would figure out a way to introduce calm and mindfulness into his work and to seek out ways to share that with others. Neema's most recent work is as co-founder of Spire. Spire is a wearable device that tracks how you breathe in real time and provides feedback via smartphone to help you reduce stress and be more mindful of your breathing patterns and respiration. For many of us, our work focuses on helping others use technology more efficiently to get more done, but it's rare that we take a step back to think about the effects of technology on our mental state and physical health. Neema's talk will focus on his research and his work experience, and I hope that you'll find inspiration, no pun intended, in this, and that you can apply that to your own UX work. So without further ado, and to kick off UXPA 2015, I'd like to welcome to the stage my friend and colleague, Dr. Neema Moraveji.
Thanks, Rich. Good morning. I was told that I can use the lapel mic, so we won't be needing these. Let's start with this. What comes to mind when you see this? Because this is the experience that I'm going to attempt to create for all of us here. You know, coming to a conference like this, sure, it's a place to network, it's a place to learn new skills, but it's also a place to step back and learn new perspectives that might fundamentally alter or shed new light on how you approach your work. And that's where creative leaps can come from. That's where when you come back from this conference, your colleagues will notice and kind of say, wow, like we've actually moved forward. You brought new insights back to us. So a lot of times in user experience work, this is exactly what we need to do. We need to peel back layers. We need to confront things that are muddled. We need to collectively gasp at what it might mean to approach these things and to take risks like this. So the title of my talk is Grow, Design, and Repeat. And I'll explain what I mean. I have 3 goals for this discussion. The first is to inspire you, to leave you inspired. Inspired about the honor and the opportunity that you each have in this field, because you are creating experiences for people, and life is a series of experiences. I'm also going to leave you a little bit intimidated. Why? Because easy to use is just not enough anymore, right? We have to go beyond. That's the whole idea of a user experience. It's not just about usability and ease of use. Let's pause right there and talk about this very topic. I want you to find your neighbor, introduce yourself, and just name one thing that you're inspired about with regard to user experience and one thing that you're intimidated about. Let's be honest with each other and be transparent, and we'll switch after about 30 seconds. Go ahead. switch people if you haven't yet already. Okay, you're wrapping it up. All right, all right. Let's bring it to a close. Wow. Who knew people love talking to each other? Okay, so the final piece that I'm going to leave you with today, let's close it up. You'll have more. You'll have plenty of opportunities to talk to each other. Trust me. Yeah. All right. Thank you for the enthusiasm. I will give you guys more opportunities to talk to each other. Don't worry. What a beautiful sound that was. My third goal is to leave you guys a little bit incredulous, right? I mean, we're all attending to this discussion right now. Let's just go for it. When I say incredulous, I mean that I am going to share with you my opinion for what the meaning of life is and how your work is connected to it, okay? These are the three principles that after thinking about what I was going to speak about today, that I've kind of come away with. The first is that UX design requires designing robots. Believe me, that made me very uncomfortable. I'll let you know what I mean. It requires personal growth on your part, and then it requires humanity. I'll explain what I mean, but first, let's talk about this idea about robots. If you guys know this gentleman, his name is Cliff Nass. He recently passed on, but he was a professor of communications and HCI at Stanford. And his fundamental contribution to the field was that people treat computers like people. Now, I don't think that they treat the literal computer like a person, but we're talking about the interface, the feedback. They treat that feedback like they treat people. And what affects us? Other people affect us deeply. So the feedback that interfaces give us affect us very deeply. They change the course of our lives, right? And what is more important in our lives than other people? Now think about how important that is and apply it to the feedback that a user interface can give you. Now that's very different from how we originally and normally conceptualize a feedback from computers, right? We think of them as, oh, users treat our interface as a tool. It's a place where they get experiences from and they move on with their own life. That is fundamentally outdated, and we need to. He did this work about 20 years ago. We're still trying to come to grips with what the implications of that work is. People don't treat computers like hammers or shopping malls or amusement parks only. No, they treat them like evaluators, teachers, mediators. They're talking about emotional intimacy here. And as UX designers, this is crucial. It's crucial for us to change our conceptualization about what UX is. An experience, when somebody has an experience with our product, it's not a static thing. It's not a noun. It's actually a verb. It's a process. The impact of a certain experience that an interface has on you actually lingers on. It affects us. And it makes sense, right? As humans, we're wired for social interaction. We're wired for communicating with other people. So when that feedback comes from, say, a computer, we're wired to take that feedback a certain way, as we would from another human being. An example of this is how a computer can influence your mindset, whether or not you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is, you did this poorly. A growth mindset is, you haven't done this right yet. They're very different. But they actually studies have shown that the mindset of the user of a computer can be very much shifted according to the type of feedback, the style of feedback from the interface. So you guys have a big responsibility. And I want you to be a little intimidated so that you take it seriously. Take this, for example. The entire paradigm of email revolves around information processing. The computer is essentially giving you feedback that you have yet to read 3,879 emails. That's pretty much what you take away. It's like, I'm already at a loss. I'm just catching up. I'm perpetually catching up. That's very different from exchanging information with other people, sending and receiving messages with people, which is about people. Right? So it's very subtle, but very crucial. Now, if you think about robots, the people who are designing robots, think about what thought they put into the design of the robot. Because the robot, it looks like a human to some degree, it has eyes, it has a nose, it has all this nonverbal cues, they have to think a lot about the social psychology, about the cognitive psychology of interacting with people. And I would argue this is a great shortcut, a great guide for us to consider that the interfaces that we're creating are essentially faceless, flat robots. They communicate nonverbal information. There's plenty of cues. There's emotional interaction there. As much as you may want to avoid that, and as much as you may want to ignore that because it may make your job more difficult, see it as an opportunity. See it as when you go and you talk with somebody out in the courtyard, the richness of the communication that's there, and realize that that's an opportunity for you to embed that into your interfaces. Now, before you kind of say, oh my God, I have so much more work that I have to do now, I have to consider like all the things that they consider. Yes, you do. But it's also a means of being a little bit more honest about what the interaction really is between the user and the interface. What are all the subtleties? You don't have to necessarily think of it as more work, but it's more things that you can acknowledge with your teammates and discuss as, well, this is what the interface design is, here's why, and here's the kind of intention behind it. So let's try this for a second. I want everyone in the room to please close your eyes for a minute. Okay? Close your eyes, put down your writing instruments, and think about a user experience that you're working on right now, back at work, at your office, a problem that you're working on. Perhaps it's an iteration, you have your current version, and you're thinking about where it's lacking or what needs to be improved upon it. You're thinking about the requirements, the features, all that, the visual design. Now consider your product, your experience, as a robot. It is a robot interacting with the person. It is not just a tool that gets used. It creates a dialogue. It affects the person in very subtle and intimate ways. Given that, what new possibilities emerge for you? What new questions emerge for you with your experience problems that you're working with, your user experience problems? What new discussions do you want to have with your teammates back at work? What notes do you want to make? Okay, go ahead and open your eyes. There's more there. So this is a kind of useful rule of thumb. We are essentially designing faceless, flat robots. It's not very, it sounds a little weird maybe, but the reality is that that's our responsibility and our opportunity. So that is how UX design requires designing robots. Oops. But it also requires your personal growth. I'll explain what I mean here. So, as a user experience designer, you were drawn to this field for a reason. You could have gone into marketing, you could have gone into programming, the architecture of it, but for some reason you were brought here. There's something about this field that you find fascinating. It's fulfilling at some degree. Let's be explicit about what that is. So when we design a user experience, a robot, that interacts with people, we're making some big statements about how the experience that these people should, our users, what experience they should have. And how your ability to relate to your users dictates the quality of your user experience. Can you relate to your users? This is why we do user research. This is why we interview them, right? We're trying to understand the subtleties behind them, what makes them tick, what they need done, but how they need it done, how they want to feel while they do it. What can make you better at that? You're going to learn some of that here at the conference. Some of you learned that perhaps yesterday in some of the courses. But what is going to make you personally better at relating to people? It's going to be to have more relationships with people that make you perhaps uncomfortable. With people that are outside of your comfort zone. People that allow you to experience what it's like to relate to more and more people. And I will tell you this, the more people that you are able to relate to personally, the more empathy you are going to be able to cultivate, and the better your user experience design will be. Because you will be taking more and more subtlety into account when you design that user experience. So there's millions and billions of people in the world. You can't relate to all of them so easily. You can relate to a subset, a very small fraction perhaps. But you can practice that ability. You can grow in that way. You will do it here this week, and I encourage you to really try to take that on. Go deeper than you normally do. Really, we're talking in a way about our egos, right? How much do we bring our own biases and assumptions when we listen to somebody, and how much are we able to put those aside and truly authentically listen? So I encourage you to have relationships that you would normally turn away from. Perhaps with children, perhaps with the elderly, with people from different races, cultural backgrounds, ways of being, ways of living. I mean, what an opportunity we have that we live in this melting pot and we're able to do that. And how great it is to say to your manager that, you know, you're working when networking, right? So now you go back to thinking about your lab or your company or your team and consider why it's so complex to create effective user experiences. Essentially, you have all these people that are working together collectively to create this robot that is supposed to relate to all these other people. And all of those people have their own communication styles, ways of relating to people, ways of listening. You're trying to fit all that into this one little robot interface that is then going to be able to relate and create wonderful experiences with all these users. It's really hard. It's really, really messy. It's really hard. There's a lot of unsaid things that are that are influencing the design of the experience. But that's what's so great about it, and that's why you're here. And I would submit to you that that's what's exciting about it. It's about life. You get your hands dirty in this field. It's a technical field that you really get to use heart and mind. So, in a way, user experience design is the science of collectively designing robots that shape life experiences for others. Pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? Now, you think about who here is married. Raise your hand if you're married. Okay? Put your hands down. Who here is in a relationship? Not necessarily married, but is in a relationship. All right, Cool. So pretty much everyone. And actually the truth is that we're all in relationships, right? With people around us. Oh, I see what's funny about that now. Well, you know, we've established that designing an experience is designing a robot for other people. Well, this is why designing a user experience, an experience can't be right or wrong, just like a relationship can't be right or wrong. But there are elements that make them better or worse, perhaps for us. Designing a user experience is like designing a relationship. And we all know how complicated that can be, right? There are tons of books, lectures, seminars, coaches around designing relationships. They're complicated. Luckily, we can work on that. So, I would submit that there are basically about 2 categories of things you can do to further your skill in user experience design and also the actual quality of the things you create. Of course, there are tons more, but these are the 6 that I kind of settled on to present today. Now, what does it take to design a great experience? It takes you being the best version of yourself. This is why this section is kind of called, you know, user experience design requires personal growth. Know your audience. So this example, you know, if you think about where SMS originally came from, was sending these messages to each other. Isolated messages. You would receive it and you would get the next one. When Apple first delivered their SMS interface, it was totally different. It's so obvious in hindsight. But they realized that these sending of messages are actually dialogues. They're dialogues, they're rich dialogues, and the reason they put it in that format is because where is another place that we visually see rich dialogues? Cartoons, where we can imagine these 2 entities having a dialogue. There's time, there's space, there's color, they differentiate these things. It was actually a massive turning point in mobile communication, was that very subtle insight. Because they did their homework, they knew their audience, they knew that the people were not just sending and receiving messages, they were engaged in intimate conversation with one another. And because they're engaged in intimate conversation, they needed a metaphor that matched their expectation. Here's another example of knowing your audience. On the left is one of the early Facebook interfaces. On the right is the one released in 2012. I think it was 2007 and 2012. The point is that when Facebook started, it was about, dare I say it, stalking. I mean, essentially it was about looking stuff up about people, finding stuff out about them. And after a while they realized, no, maybe this isn't the whole story. That it becomes a place where you share yourself. That's a fundamental shift, a paradigm shift in how they're thinking about their users. So kudos to them for knowing their audience. So just by putting that cover photo, it's basically saying, hey, this is what I'm about, at least right now, to others. And making the photos that you purposefully share paramount, not just your stats, your bio, right? That's even kind of shrunken down quite a bit. Now it's under the profile picture, shrunken down, and that's quite different. Here's another example. This is from a friend of mine, Tristan Harris at Google. So what he found, and what we all know, is that email has gotten away from us, right? It kind of owns our time instead of us owning our time. And our values get compromised. And that is a fundamental problem with user interface technology, is that our values and intentions become compromised by interfaces that lure us, that exploit our attention, that try to distract us. So what this is saying is, what if you could define and be explicit about what your values are? Currently, you have to kind of steer in the back of your head, okay, I'm only going to check email one time this hour, or I'm only going to check it one time this minute. Right? But what this is saying is, at least, you could override it, but at least give the user an opportunity to be explicit about their values, their intentions, and then let's support them later, because we know what their values are. So this is about being thoughtful, right? In a relationship with another person, the more thoughtful you are, the more you think. Being thoughtful means thinking about what they would actually want. Not what you think they want, but what they really would want. And I find it for myself, it's a great practice. The more thoughtful I can be in my relationship, it's a practice of being thoughtful for my user experience design. And go beyond the surface. So this is an example also from Tristan, where you've got the Google Maps interface, and you have the options around walking or taking the bus or driving. And you have this, if the user was able to define their values to the computer, if the computer knew what their values were and say, hey, I really want to be more physically active. Perhaps I'm trying to get more healthy or lose weight or something like that, then it can give a little bit more information to motivate you. Hey, you're going to burn 86 calories here. Right? These subtle things, just because the computer knows your intention and your values, it's able to do very thoughtful things and go beyond the logistics of life and into what matters to the person. This is what is separating the kind of tried and true interfaces from the ones that go beyond. They go beyond the logistics and into values and intentions. They touch our hearts. They touch what's important to us. Even in something like getting from point A to point B, which is what this example is about. It's still a person with their own values. Next is about, the first kind of category was about listening to our users, right? Being thoughtful, going beyond the surface, identifying their values. But then the other category is about how we act, how you act in a relationship. Well, acting with authenticity is crucial, right? The more authentic we can be in our relationships, the better they end up being. Even if it's kind of confrontational, or not what the person wants to hear supposedly, but if it's authentic, it only leads to good things. So in this example, this is a loading message from Slack. And as you're waiting for the next screen to load, they show these different loading messages. I'm sure you guys have seen these. If you haven't, they're delightful. They are genuinely delightful. Why are they so delightful? These messages we see in our daily life. They're delightful because they're authentic. You can feel that the people who created this interface, which is all about work communication, could be very dry, it could be very logistically oriented, but they know through their own user research is that people are at work are still people. And people have values, they have aspirations, they're not just automatons walking around, and they themselves are the same. And so they put these different messages that are inspirational, and sometimes they're truisms, you might say. They touch us, actually, because they're timeless. And they're, you might kind of think, I actually consider it quite a risk when they did this, to kind of be as bombastic as to say, we're going to put these timeless phrases in our interface as people are trying to get things done. We're not going to show them anything about work. It's totally not about work. It's a pretty big risk that they took. So part of what this discussion is going to ask of you, and to go from kind of good to great, is to take calculated risks. And I'll come back to that, but this is a great example of that. So as long as you're being authentic, that's something to consider when thinking about how efficient are you being. Efficiency is important, effectiveness is important, but think about, are you being authentic? Are you authentically resonating with the users, their values, their intentions? What's important to them? Here's Trello. If you guys haven't used Trello, I think it's very similar in a way, in terms of authenticity. They're very authentic to who they are, and they're very authentic to the kind of experience that they're creating. They could, it's a project management software, right? Task management, organization, you kind of manage projects, which is a world where it's very serious. It's very kind of cut and dry. It's very discreet. But they're very explicit about trying to have fun, about connecting people. That this isn't just a Gantt chart with information. There's people involved here. So you can do all kinds of little things that bring humanity to the experience. And that's what makes it delightful. I mean, it's not just that, right? They have to have an easy-to-use interface. They have to be efficient, take care of error recovery, all the things that we're used to. But they add humans to it. They add humanity to it. So I encourage you to check it out and see what they did. They even let you do things like, put stickers on it, almost childlike in a way, but no, it's as childlike as it is to check off a to-do list with a little check mark. Feels good. It's human. We like to have a little spice in life. Here's another example of you guys. I'm sure you probably were familiar with this, probably not anymore. They retired the fail whale, but this is when Twitter would be over capacity, they would show this message. And it actually became a complete sensation. People almost were like, think about what's happening. You're saying to the user, you cannot do this thing that you want to do right now. It's like the worst thing, supposedly, in experience design. There's nothing the user can do. They can't save a draft. They're just stuck. But they turned it into something positive. They were authentic. And the specific phrase here is confident humility. They're saying, look, here's the situation, but we're still proud of ourselves. We're not apologizing only. We're saying, look, this is what's happening, but hey, we're people too, and we're still trying our best. There's a kind of power there still. They're having fun with it. So confident humility is a simple thing to practice and to bring to your user experience designs. Do one thing well. So if you think about your relationships, and it's like, okay, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to be thoughtful, and all these things, it can potentially feel overwhelming. When you have that feeling, when you have that emotion, just remember, let me just do one thing well. Right? For a particular screen, you can't be confident humility and be thoughtful, go beyond the surface. Choose one. Choose one thing, but do it well. There's a surprising amount of power. We often want to do everything. We want to check every single box, and then we get away, and then we don't have any time to do any one thing well. And it's so rare that when somebody does it, it's very powerful for people. And people really appreciate it. So on that note, let's turn to our neighbors and talk about a particular experience, a particular aspect of an experience design that we're doing, where we could throw away some of the clutter and focus on doing one particular thing well. Explain what's happening to your neighbor and explain how you could do that one thing well. Go ahead, and I'll let you know when to switch. Okay, go ahead and switch. Clap. Clap if you can hear me. 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 Right, great job. That was awesome. It worked. That's the first time I tried that. I'm going to give you another chance to talk with your neighbors. This section that we just wrapped up is about personal growth, really, as a UX designer, and our relationships and our work, and how they're not so separate. Thankfully, they're not so separate, right? We don't want to just have life happening out there and then work happening out here. We're always alive. We're always ourselves. So how can we make that better and better? This time, we're not going to jump into a conversation. We're going to think on our own for a little bit about a time that part of our UX process asked us to grow. Okay? And what the benefits are. So just take a minute or a few seconds, just think about a time when part of your user experience design process pushed your boundaries. You were uncomfortable, but there were benefits. Uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable, the better. Okay? Now let's share that with our neighbors. Okay, this will be a quick one and then we'll continue. Okay, go ahead. Can I listen in? I'm kind of curious.
So I work at Citibank. I was saying last week we wanted to do some field research, which we don't do a lot of field research. In this case, I wanted to broadcast what we did.
Fantastic. Love that one. Okay. Clap if you can hear me. 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 That was great. What a rush that was. Hearing about people's experiences going beyond their previous limitations that they had put on themselves. Right? I mean, it's all linked. It's all linked, and it all makes you better as an experience designer. Now, the third thing I wanted to share with you, the third kind of principle I wanted to share with you is about humanity. Now, I'll explain what I mean. I don't mean kind of collectively the human species, but our whole humanity, our mind and our heart. So, you're probably familiar with this figure. This is a description of flow state, getting into flow state. Flow state is a theory from a psychologist at University of Chicago, Dr. Csikszentmihalyi. Very hard to say his last name, as we all know. And it identifies this tension between challenge and skill. That when people are engaged, not when things are just easy to use. Rather, they're most engaged when there is a challenge, but their skill matches that challenge and even pushes them a little bit so that they feel like they're growing. They feel like they're using their skill. They're being pushed or they're being challenged in a way. That challenges the existing paradigm of just making things easy to use. Now, of course, you have to have usability. It's a given. It's assumed that you have to have things be easy to use enough so that people can understand the challenge, use the tools, and so on. But it isn't the goal. So, as part of my work, I have interviewed tons of people around stress and what they feel about stress. And it turns out that people are not anti-stress. We are not anti-stress. We're anti-chronic stress. We're anti-bad stress, but we like stress. We like the right kind of stress. It's exciting. Of course we do. Now we look back and it's like, of course we do. But if you think about your user experience design in that way, it's very enlightening. It's very different. It gives you a lot of new ideas. So, usability research primarily has focused on reducing the challenge, right? On the left side, the y-axis of that. Bringing the challenge down in the interface. But what I would propose, also considering, is increasing the skill. Leave the challenge where it is. If it's hard, it's hard. People may not be averse to that. But motivate people more, or give them better tools. Make them more skilled, and they'll be more engaged, because you're essentially making them more powerful. Right? I'll give you specific examples of what I mean, but that's a different way to think about your experience design. If it's complicated, your job isn't only to make it less complicated. That is not your job. Your job is to, perhaps, part of your job is to get people up into that top into the right corner. Give them the skills, motivate them. Like, again, think back to the whole people treat computers as people thing. What would a coach do? What would a teacher do? It doesn't just try to make stuff easier all the time. It gets you pumped up. It gives you the skills. It shows you that you can do it. And teaches you how. So of course the challenge here needs to be something that the user understands. That may be actually a big part of your job, is making the challenge clear. What is the challenge here? What is the complex part? So that people understand and say, oh, okay, that's the challenging part? Okay, I can do this. Right? Instead of just burying it and avoiding it and pretending that it's not there and just pandering to them. Inspire them. They may actually enjoy that experience more. So, in order to do that, ask yourself, what's the difference between a great interface and a great experience? What's the difference? Some products we use, we know they have a great interface. And some products we use, we know they have a great experience. They're different. It's subtle, but it is different. You can use this on your own designs. This can be a great kind of topic for people to talk about. You know, you have your team, your developers, your program managers, ethnographers, and let's all give our perspectives on this. You know, what's the difference here with our work? You know, a great interface is easy to use, definitely. It has great affordances. You don't need instructions to use it necessarily. It stays out of the way. It's generally neutral, utilitarian. You have to have that. You have to have that. You will have that. You will design that into your tool, and it's an iterative process. It will always get better. But it's not the holy grail. Think about your relationships. Is the whole goal of your relationship to be easy to use? If the answer is yes, I don't know. No, I mean, of course you don't want it to be difficult to use. But that's not the whole point. Right? And if sometimes we get in a position where we actually, that is what we want, okay. But it will stop at some point. We want more. Humanity isn't about being easy all the time. People are not about being easy all the time. Engagement is different. And it is okay to challenge our users. It is okay to reward them as well. People love being rewarded for taking challenges. That is arguably more powerful than making something easy to use. rewarding them for taking challenges. Think about kids. Think about yourselves. How much would you want something to be easy to use versus being rewarded for challenging yourself? It's about you believing in yourself, and you growing and feeling good about yourself, and touching their values, speaking to their values. And let's have an example of this. So, a great experience is different than a great interface, and that great experiences have opinions. They take a stand on something. They have a mission that you can feel. They inspire you. They're people that are kind of like, wow, that person's alive. Now, that's all great and good. How do you do that? Rule of thumb, take calculated risks. If your interface is not taking any risks whatsoever, it's a good sign that maybe we're not taking a stand on anything. Maybe we don't have any opinions on anything. Maybe the only thing we're doing is trying to get out of the way. Again, that's not bad. It's kind of like, okay, once you're there, start to take a stand on something. And that forces you to use all the user research that you've done. To write down in words what you really think the user's values are, what the user's what their needs are. And you can iterate on it, don't worry. But take that calculated risk. And even if the user doesn't kind of match them completely, it will be so refreshing. They will just appreciate that you actually said something, that you actually are taking a stand for something. And the reality is that people have different kinds of values, even for the same thing, that they can say, oh, okay, well, at least I know what I'm getting out of this interface. It may not match everything that I want, it may not match all my values, but at least it's going to do something that's it will do it. So treat your UX like your relationship. You don't want to sit at dinner with someone and okay, well, at least they're there, at least they're sitting in this chair and having dinner with me. No, you want them to say something, even if it's annoying or even if it's confrontational. They're there. They're alive. They're still pushing in life. They're still growing. So catch yourself when you're becoming predictable. Again, this is if you want to go from usability to experience. There are times for it. It's not always the case, but there are times that you want to do that. Think about making love. Everyone looked up. That guy looked up. Okay. Nice. My wife told me, you should say that. They'll look up. They'll look up. It's okay. You don't want to be unpredictable. It doesn't mean that every time you make love, it's going to be the fireworks are going to go off and you're no, okay, but there are little things you can do. But if you make a practice of doing these little things and taking a stand and having an opinion and living, people will appreciate it. Even if it's not what they want at the time, they'll appreciate it because there's something to talk about and iterate on. Get feedback to you on. I mean, I feel like this example was really strong. The text on the bottom is really small, but they just put it all out there. We believe in effortless personal finances. We believe smart saving choices should be easy and even fun. We believe one card and one account can change your life forever. I mean, these are kind of crazy statements, some of them more crazy than others, in that they're just boom, we're just going to say it, and then we're going to back it up. I'll give you another example. This is Mixpanel. It's software that allows you to analyze your web traffic, your app traffic, and what people are doing. What's powerful about it is hard to see here, but on the top it says, learn how to use our advanced analytics platform to create interactive reports. Actually, that's not what's powerful about it. The powerful thing about it is that this software consistently reminds you why you should use it. It tells you, here's the benefit, and then it tries to recreate that. It doesn't always succeed perfectly, it doesn't do everything, but it tells you, this is what you can do. And it makes sure that that statement aligns with the values of its users. And then it just tries to do it. It's actually pretty brilliant. where they just consistently reiterate and explain to you. It's not the same thing over and over again. It's different for each screen in the interface, but it tells you, here's why you're using this interface. Here's what's unique and powerful about it. You kind of just get excited, like, oh wow, I'm going to do that. And you start, and then it motivates you to use the interface. So you actually are challenged, but you know why. You have a reward there. You know why you're taking on this challenge. I know we're all familiar with these. It's an amazing example of different values being put on display. You have essentially the same system here. The product is essentially the same, but the values of the designers and the users and the alignment that they are trying to get between the experience and their users is so different that it really makes it clear this kind of dynamic at play. It's really about the experience. One of them on the left is like, you know, funky, it's fun, it's kind of like what the value is, like get a ride in a minute. And the other one is like your ride on demand. You know, I mean, it's totally different. And as a user, you really feel totally different. So it's just so imperative. You can see that neither of them is trying to do both, right? This is back to the kind of like do one thing, but do it well. Neither of them is trying to do both. They're like, you know what? We're just going to go in this way and we're just going to own it. And that is also what's hard about designing user experiences, that you have this kind of potential for design by committee, and that's a challenging thing. You have to create an objective goal. That's why we create personas and we put values up there and say, you know what, we're all going to try to reach that. That's the purpose, is that we can turn this committee into designing a single robot that has a single voice and a single experience that it's trying to relate with people about. So, this is the last time you'll have a chance to talk with your neighbors. So if you want to get their phone number or anything, this will be the time to do it. Especially after the hot and heavy talk. What aspect of your project changes when your goal goes from easy to use to take calculated risks? What changes in your user experience? Just take one part of it. What if you were to switch your mindset from making it easy to use to saying, well, if we were to take calculated risk, what risk would we take? And how would we go for it? Like, what design change might you make? What might you start thinking about differently in your user experience? It's not a simple question, but it's important for you to kind of take this and let's put it into practice and push a little bit. And if you talk to someone else, it'll get a little bit more concrete. So take a minute and please do that with your neighbor. All right, switch people. Okay, clap if you can hear me. 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 Thank you. Okay. All right. We don't have a lot of time, but I hope you got their phone number. This whole notion of acknowledging the impact that we have on a user's state of mind is the kind of foundation for the work that I've been doing at Stanford. Are we creating anxiety for our users? Are we creating feelings of being overwhelmed? Or are we creating flow? Are we creating feeling of being an expert, of being powerful, of having peace, having balance? What are we doing? How can we do that better? So we've published some heuristics, some papers about going from kind of usability to what we call calming technology. They're available on the website, which is a little outdated. The reason it's outdated, I'll explain to you. But this is some of the work. I just want to quickly go through some of the work from some of our student prototypes. This is a lock screen for Android where each time you check the phone, it starts at 100, but each time you check the phone, it goes down one. Very different. Listening to the values of the users. Let's skip the other. This is one of the best. I love this one. It's actually for kids to look up words. On the left is whenever you have a word that you can't encounter, take a 12-year-old boy or girl or whatever, it has a button that says, I don't know yet. Very powerful. And then on top of that, as they add words that they don't know yet and as they look them up, the head of that Yeti monster, they call it the Yeti monster, the head grows. So it actually looks like you're getting smarter. Instead of like, oh, I don't know that, I don't know this. It's very much based on mindset research. I'm going to skip that. This is an interface where if students would prompt a work team members about something that they wanted to acknowledge or thank their teammates about. One small thing a day. Just thank someone for something. And then the next morning when you got to work, your colleagues would appear in your inbox. I don't have a lot of time. This was a meeting interface. They actually found that when people have a voice, everything goes better. Everything got better in the meeting. The effectiveness, the self-report on how effective the planning was, the agenda. I mean, agendas are important, but people having a voice turns out to be even more important. So everyone would vote anonymously, and then you'd see. And then you would align around like so many things. Time would turn out to be a very useful thing. This is an interface where instead of just telling you the priority of things, they would estimate how long each email would take. Green is like a quick one, red is a longer one, yellow is in between. So you could just chunk your emails instead of just this kind of big pool that you had to deal with every time you opened up your email. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. This was a comparison between nature imagery being flat but also high pixel depth. They actually influence people differently because when there's high pixel depth, you have more things to focus on, and it's actually more calming for people. If you can look here on the desk, what do you see? You see sod. That's real sod, real grass, embedding natural elements into the workplace. So very nice to just kind of pet grass and smell it while you're thinking about something, it turns out. And that brings me to a project that I ended up working on the most, and we ended up turning into a company, and that's around Spire. Let's roll this quick video.
Your breath reflects your state of mind. Your state of mind is influenced by how you breathe. Introducing Spire. Track your body, breath, and mind.
So it is really hard work trying to figure out how you link people's state of mind with products. So believe me, I understand that user experience design is hard, but that's why we're here. That's why we love what we do. That's why this convention and conference is so important, and that's why the people around you are fascinating people that, honestly, are really fun to be around and are interesting, both intellectually and personally. So these are the three principles that we covered, right? You're essentially designing faceless flat robots, sorry to tell you, but it's also an opportunity. It requires your personal growth. and requires some humanity if you want to stand out from the crowd and go from usability to experience. You know, people interact with so many different things throughout their day, and people often talk about being in the shower and having an aha moment and attributing it to the shower without realizing that they are the same person. So whatever you can do to be one of those magical droplets that makes them think that it was your interface, you might as well take that opportunity. Thank you so much for your time.